In this video, let's understand about primary key in SQL Server. Primary key is a constraint that uniquely identifies each row in a table. It enforces data integrity in tables. Let's first understand why primary key is needed and what is the importance of having a primary key in a table. Okay, so I have connected to my database and let's switch to demo new database. Here currently I don't have any table. You can see here in tables folder there is nothing. Let's first create a table that is not having a primary key. I am creating a table with name employees and I am adding three columns: employee name, salary and department name. Let's create this table and now I am inserting three rows in my table. So let's insert this also. Now let's check the data present in our table. If I do a select star from employees, I am getting these three rows. Currently, if you notice, I have names which are unique: Mark, Peter, and Sarah. Let's say I want to find the salary of Peter. What I can do? I can do select star from employees where employee name equal to, I can say Peter. Right? If I execute this, I will get salary, so I can specify salary instead of specifying select star, and if I execute this I will get 60,000, right? So this is fine. But let's say one more employee joins our company and he is also having the same name as Peter. So let's say Peter, there is one more Peter. Let's say he is earning 50,000 and he's working in HR department, right? So now we have two Peters. One is working in sales department, one is working in HR department. Now let's insert this also, right? And now let's again check our data. You can see here we have Peter in sales department, Peter in HR department. If I ask you to find the salary of Peter and you run this query where employee name equal to Peter, you will basically get two records, right? So if I run this query, I will get two records, 60,000 and 50,000. Now how we will find what is the salary of the Peter we are looking for, right? We need to specify the department. So we can specify where department equal to HR, then we'll get the salary of the employee Peter who is working in the HR department. But let's say in future one more Peter will come and who will also join the HR department. Then how we will find the salary of that Peter? This is why table should have a primary key. Primary key can uniquely identify a record in a table. So let's do one thing. Let's create the same table with a primary key. Okay. So let's drop this table. Drop table employees. Execute. Table has been dropped. Let's create the employees table with a primary key. Creating a primary key is very simple. When you are creating a table, you can specify the column which should be used for your primary key. Generally, we will make our primary key for a column that will have unique values. For employees table, we will have employee ID that will have unique values. So let's say employee ID that will be of integer type, right? And to make this employee ID as primary key, we need to specify primary key keyword here. So we can say primary key and that's it. If I execute this time it will make our table with a primary key. Let's execute this. Okay, commands has been executed. Now let's refresh the table and we have this employees table, and if I expand this and go to columns, you can see employee ID and you can see one little key icon here which specifies this column is a primary key. You can see here PK, which stands for primary key, and you can go to keys column and you can say this is the primary key which has been created on this table, on the employees table. Now let's see some of the features of primary key. Table can have only one primary key. If you try to have two primary keys, you will get the error. And a primary key can be defined on one column or the combination of multiple columns. Right here we have defined primary key on a single column, but we can combine multiple columns and create a composite primary key that we will understand in the next video. A primary key cannot exceed 16 columns. So when you are creating a composite primary key, you cannot involve more than 16 columns. And primary key do not allow null values. This is very important. And primary key column will not allow duplicate values also. Right. So let's try to insert some data here. Let's say I will insert employees, but this time I will also specify the primary keys. So let's say Mark is having employee ID as 101 and so on. So I have specified the employee IDs here, right? Let's execute this. Data has been inserted, but let's try to insert null in our table, right? Let's try to insert null for our primary key. Let's see what will happen. Let's say instead of 104, I will say null here. Let's try to execute this. You can see here we cannot insert null into column employee ID because employee ID is our primary key. And if you try to add a duplicate value, let's say you want to add employee ID 101 again, you will again get the error because this is again a violation of primary key constraint, right? We cannot insert duplicate values in this column. So primary key column will not allow duplicate or null values. All columns defined within the primary key constraint must be defined as a not null column. Okay, so if you are creating a composite key, then all the columns which you are considering for a composite key should be not nullable. So this is how you can create primary key in SQL Server. But let's say your table is already there and you want to add primary key once the table is created. Let's see how that can be done. Let's drop this table first. Table has been dropped, right? Now let's say I will recreate this table without having the primary key. Let's execute this and let's insert this data also, right? So we have again 4 columns here, and if I refresh my table here, you can notice in columns I don't have that key icon because the primary key has been removed now. Now let's see how we can add it in an existing table. So I want to make employee ID as my primary key. To do that, we need to say alter table. I want to alter employees table and I want to add primary key here, and in the parenthesis I need to specify the column. I want to make employee ID as my primary key. So if I execute this, we are getting the error here because if you read this error, primary key constraint on nullable column in this table. So as we understood earlier, when you are creating a primary key, that column should be a not nullable column, right? So we need to define this column as a not nullable. So let's drop the table again. Table has been dropped. Now, when creating this table, we need to specify employee ID as the not null. It means we cannot insert null for this column. Let's create this table again. Now let's add the data. Now again, if you refresh your employees table, still we don't have the primary key on this table, right? To add the primary key on a existing table, we need to run this particular statement. Alter table, table name, add primary key, and within the bracket, we need to specify the column on which we want to create primary key. Let's execute this. This time primary key has been added. Now let's refresh this table here, open columns. You can see now we have this key icon on employee ID, and if you go to keys folder, you can see we have this primary key created for us. And I want to specify one more syntax that you can use when adding a primary key while creating a table. Let's drop the table again. Okay, so previously we have seen how we can add the primary key when creating the table. So we can specify primary key here that will create the primary key for us. But there is one more way. Instead of specifying it here, what we can do, we can specify it at the end. What we can do, we can say constraint. Now we can specify the primary key name. If you notice here the primary key name was generated automatically by SQL Server. But here we can define our custom name also. So let's specify a custom name here. I can say pk underscore, I will say employees, and I'm specifying this primary key on employee ID. So let's specify that column, and then we need to specify what type of constraint I'm giving. This is a primary key constraint, and then I need to specify the column which should be used for the primary key. Then I can specify the employee ID here. So this is one more syntax that you can use to create primary key on a table. Let's create this. Let's refresh the employee table again. This time again we have this key symbol on employee ID, and if I go to keys folder, you can see this time the primary key has been created with the custom name which we have specified here. So that's all for this video. In this video we have understood the basic concepts about primary key. In the next video we will understand what is a composite primary key.